But let me talk first of all about Benghazi, because I think this is very interesting to show how the intelligence community is working, in the sense that the ruling elite wants Romney in the White House. The Bilderberg Group, I believe, made a decision in favor of Romney after he came to their meeting. You can see the Federal Reserve, the money from Wall Street. All of this is signaling that they want Romney. So how do they do it? Well, we've had one October surprise already, except we had it in September, and that was Benghazi. Now, there are two sides to this. One is the so-called film. The other is the killing. But these are both important, and they go together. Now, the film is not the killing, and I'm not claiming that at all. But what I'm saying is there was this film, and the Islamophobic film was the subject of demonstrations in 25 countries around the world, in Cairo, in Pakistan, in countries in Europe, all over the Arab world, North Africa, you name it. This was about the film. So what's with the film? The film came out of a little studio in California, and we're asked, first of all, to believe that a guy called Sam Basile created the film. Now, Sam Basile is a little nobody. He's a patsy. He's a drug ex-convict. He's probably a drug informer for the DEA or FBI or something like this. And he took the fall as the guy who created the movie. But if we look at who owns the studio and who signed for the permit, and actually how the movie came about, we're led to somebody called Joseph Nasrallah, who is a Coptic Christian. He's the chief executive officer of Media for Christ, a Coptic Christian from Egypt. And it seems to me that's the guy who really made this movie come about. He's had some experience, and he has a studio to make that work. Now, if we follow him a little bit, we're led into the midst of the infamous Islamophobia network. And the Islamophobia network, people, I think, are familiar with it. It's the group that organized a demonstration and a campaign back in September of 2010 in Ground Zero, right, in Lower Manhattan. They were the big ones campaigning that there should be no mosque and no Islamic community center. Now, Joseph Nasrallah addressed one of those demonstrations, right, that demonstration on September 11th, 2010. This is the network that many associate with Pamela Geller, who's very vocal and very strident, and she's all over the internet. But let me just point you, Nasrallah at that demonstration was on the program with John Bolton. Now, John Bolton is a top neocon. John Bolton is the Romney campaign. We know that Romney is surrounded by these warlike, angry neocons. We have Kagan, we have Dan Senior, we have John Bolton, we have Elliot Cohen, we have Robert Joseph, the guy who put the words in about the Niger yellow cake into the Bush State of the Union address. So there's a whole angry Islamophobic neocon faction. They want to make a comeback. They want to vindicate themselves. They're still humiliated, smarting from the fact that their man Bush was, leaving office with a 22% popularity, the lowest in modern times. They want to come back and vindicate themselves. And since they're neocons, they know only one way to do that, and that is by war. They say we'll have a new successful war of aggression to make people forget about the old war of aggression. They have attached themselves to Romney. I would say if Romney wins the election, there will be U.S. military intervention in Syria by February, March, maybe when the springtime comes and the campaigning season gets better. But when you're dealing with that film, you can see all the Republicans say, no, the film doesn't matter, the film doesn't matter. Well, might they say it, the Romney campaign is heavily implicated in the film. In shorthand on Twitter, we might write, the Romney campaign created the Islamophobic film that started the ball rolling all over the place. Now, when you're planning an operation like this, you need the film to create the atmosphere, right, so that people all around the world can understand what's going on. But now let's switch to the specific operation to kill Ambassador Stevens. Now, unfortunately, Ambassador Stevens was heavily in contact with the terrorist elements, the Salafists, the Wahhabites. In Libya, it's called the Senussi Brotherhood, in that terror corridor, right? Benghazi, Derna, Tobruk. And Derna, of course, is the city that has given more suicide bombers per capita than any other city in the world. he was basically there. He had been there as vice consul before. He was dealing with them in 2008, 2009. And I'm afraid part of his mission was to send these people from Libya to Turkey and then on to Syria, where they are the heart and soul of the rebellion against President Assad. It's precisely terrorist fighters of this type. So I'm afraid that's what he was doing. It's interesting that the last meeting that Ambassador Stevens had, 8:30 in the evening on September 11th local time, he was meeting with a Turkish diplomat. Why would the U.S. ambassador to Libya be meeting with a Turkish diplomat in Benghazi, Libya? Well, if you put together what we know, it's probably the next phase of that airlift and sea lift of those fighters, those terrorists, the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group and people like that, from Libya to Turkey and then across the border into Syria. So there was every reason for Ambassador Stevens in the State Department to think that there was no threat to him because he was on such friendly terms with so many of these militia elements, right, these jihadis. Now, if we want to ask who killed Ambassador Stevens, the answer to that, according to leaks that have been in various British papers and also in the U.S., it is a guy called Kumu. You can look it up, Q-U-M-U or K-U-M-U, Sufyan Kumu. And his group is now called Ansar al-Sharia. They seem to be the ones who sent a well-armed team with mortars and rocket grenades and all the rest to come and kill the U.S. ambassador. Now, Kumu was in Guantanamo Bay for 4 years. He's an alumnus of Guantanamo. I think he's a U.S. double agent, and I think that's pretty much a prima facie case. Kumu is a U.S. double agent, right? The way you get out of Guantanamo is by becoming a double agent for the rest of your life. Now, that's the attack. Now what's new from this past week is the defense. Now, last Wednesday, there was a hearing of the Issa Committee, Darrell Issa, California, supposedly the richest guy in the Congress. And this was addressed by a bunch of people from the State Department, although he had a guy, the leadoff witness, who was from the Utah National Guard. Well, if he's from the Utah National Guard, I guess we can have some idea where he stands vis-a-vis Romney, right, given the Mormon domination of the state. But that's not part of the argument. What we had then was a State Department official showing a map of the U.S. facilities in Benghazi from above. And from above, she said, oh, there were these buildings here. At a certain point, Congressman Jason Chaffetz, lo and behold, another Utah Mormon congressman, goes absolutely berserk. And he starts yelling, point of order, point of order, point of order. You can't show that picture. Take that picture down. It turned out that Chaffetz had been to Benghazi for less than 1 day, came back an expert, but he said that he had been instructed by everybody on the scene in Benghazi, never, never, never show that picture. And the State Department official said, look, this is from Google. You can get this commercially. This is not classified in the least. And it turned out, as Dana Milbank and others reported in the Washington Post and elsewhere, that what Chaffetz was freaking out about was that there was a special CIA base at the consulate. And the consulate was supposed to be guarded by a 12-man or 12-person CIA rapid response team that would have made a very important difference in the relation of forces. I hope you agree. And they had apparently gone AWOL. And as Dana Milbank wrote in the Washington Post last Thursday, it looks like that the CIA was the organ that was letting Ambassador Stevens down. So there's one layer of security. A CIA team that was there but didn't intervene, and now the CIA is trying to cover up that they exist in the first place. Now there's another element. One of the backup layers of security is the so-called 17th of February Martyrs Brigade. And they actually had a barracks in the compound, just as the CIA did pretty much. The 17th of February Martyrs Brigade had their barracks there. And they also ran away. They were nowhere to be found. Now, who's the 17th of February Martyrs Brigade? We got to go back so we can know them by their deeds. Last year in Libya, there was a struggle for power of the Libyan military. On the one side, you had this guy, Yunus. Yunus had been a general in the Gaddafi army. He had defected from Gaddafi in the springtime of last year, gone to Benghazi, and he'd been acclaimed as the new boss of the Libyan armed forces. Okay, so he was sort of the in-country candidate to be the dominant general. But the U.S. had sent in another guy called Khalifa Haftar, H-I-F-T-E-R usually, or H-A-F-T-E-R. And Haftar had written in a book in French that he'd published years ago that he had been on the CIA payroll. And to underline this fact, he'd been living in Virginia, not far from CIA headquarters here in Langley. He was sent back, and he was the CIA candidate to be the head of the Libyan military. All right. At a certain point, the 17th of February Martyrs Brigade intervenes to assassinate Yunus and a couple of his colonels. So in other words, Haftar takes over the military of Libya thanks to the 17th of February CIA Martyrs Brigade. Now, to sum this all up, we have a CIA asset who kills the American ambassador. We have a CIA 12-man team who do not intervene, and we have a Mormon congressman who's trying to cover it up. And then we have the 17th of February Martyrs Brigade, another CIA asset that also declines to intervene. Just one more piece of interesting evidence. The story that the whole thing was a demonstration gone violent, right? This is the whole Romney campaign now depends on refuting this story that the demonstration went violent. Well, you look on the Fox News website, and Fox News reports that 4 days after the event, a briefing was given to the House Intelligence Committee saying that, yes, it had been a demonstration gone violent. And the person giving that briefing was none other than General David Petraeus, the head of the CIA. So this thing has CIA written all over it. But now I would say, what CIA? What faction in the CIA that we know of, that we've been aware of for some time, has this existential interest in making sure that Romney gets into the White House? I say the prime suspects are the CIA Mormon mafia. Interestingly enough, last Friday, when Hillary Clinton showed up at CSIS, she showed up there, right, to try to defend, because ultimately, if anybody's responsible, the cabinet officer, right? There's such a thing as ministerial responsibility. If you want to blame anybody, it's Hillary Clinton. But fine. So she goes there and gets introduced by none other than Brent Scowcroft, the Mormon former head of the National Security Council for Bush the Elder. Bush the Elder, by the way, who got us into this whole series of ruinous Middle East wars with the first Gulf War, right, back in the days of Saddam Hussein the first time around. So there is this CIA Mormon mafia, right? The young Mormons go overseas, they become missionaries, they learn a foreign language, they come back, they can put on the application, don't smoke, don't drink, don't womanize, straight arrow, clean living, and the royal road to promotions, especially when you've got an angel like Brent Scowcroft and others like him who are superintending this entire thing. So you look at all of the hot air and lies and disinformation that have been purveyed in this country about this incident, and all of this stuff that I'm telling you is absolutely in the public domain. It was an October surprise to Carterize Obama, right? Because they're working from the original Obama printout that he's the new Carter, and they want to make sure that he gets and stays the new Carter. So they want to Carterize him, and they did it with this incident, right? With the film and the killing. And look at all those coincidences, right? This is just, it's too much to be a coincidence. Some faction in the CIA clearly wanted this to happen, and now they've made it happen. And this is supposed to be, I think, the first step in trying to decide the presidential election. There may be another one, but what I'm trying to alert people to is, if you remember, Alex, when Obama was contending for the presidency, there was this process going on in the background whereby the Brzezinski faction was seizing control of pieces of the policy apparatus, right? They were taking over pieces of the executive branch, even as Obama marched towards the White House, right? There were things going on in the background. And I think that's what's happening right now. So people have got to wake up. Romney is the ruling class choice. They've used Obama. I think they've gotten what they think they can out of him. His usefulness has been outlived.